have your notes ready to go and fill in. Remember, anything that has a pencil next to it is something that you could potentially see on your knowledge check this week. So let's begin. When comparing medieval and Renaissance literature, it reminds me a lot of Renaissance and medieval art. So if we look at medieval literature was often written in Latin, which would pose multiple problems. First, if you didn't speak Latin, there's no way that you're going to be able to, one, read, and two, understand what it is you were reading. This led to a lack of literacy among Europeans. Concepts covered in medieval literature were also very medieval in nature. Religion, chivalry, and courtly love were all the concepts taught. And the main theme of most literature coming out of medieval times is religion. Renaissance literature becomes a little bit different. Renaissance literature first is written in the vernacular. And on the next slide, we're going to look more at what vernacular means, but we can think of it easily as written in the language that is spoken. So in England, it's written in English. In France, words were written in French, and so on. Concepts, again, were religion, because religion is still an important part of daily life, but also historical issues and social issues. And this leads into the theme. The theme is humanism. Remember, humanists were concerned about the whole being, the whole person. They were concerned about going back and looking at classical literature. And so it would make sense that these concepts would be prevalent in Renaissance literature. So if we're talking about what writing in the vernacular means, what specifically is that? So first, what is vernacular? It's the spoken language. So in Europe, it would be languages like English, French, Spanish, Italian, and so on. It means that there's a lot more reading materials available. So if we have things invented in this time period, like the printing press makes it easy to make lots of copies of materials. And so people are reading things written in their spoken language, meaning they don't have to know how to speak Latin, so you don't have to be especially educated. And now the printing press means that there are a lot more copies of reading materials going around. So not just these scrolls or these illuminated manuscripts written by monks from the Middle Ages. Instead, you have a lot more reading materials. So for example, travelers' accounts. You have explorers coming back to Europe and writing about the things they saw in the New World. This would certainly be something that people would be interested in learning. Government communication was easily spread by the printing press, written in the vernacular. So if there were new rules or laws that needed to be mandated, people could read about them. Medical manuals, and also broadsheets. And a broadsheet is an early newspaper. It would have been printed on one large sheet, so large or broad mean the same thing, and it would give the news of the day. Because it was written in the language people spoke, they were able to read it. As a result, literacy grew, and that means that more people in Europe were able to read. So today we're going to look at 3 important authors of the Renaissance, and tomorrow we'll look at the 4th, and that's William Shakespeare. So first we're going to take a look at Dante Alighieri and see why he is so important. So Dante is an Italian poet. He lives a little before the Renaissance starts, but he was born in Italy, and we know that the Renaissance starts early in Italy because of the trade and the new information coming in from around the world. So Dante is sort of like what we could consider a bridge between Middle Ages and Renaissance writing in Europe. Dante also wrote in the vernacular, and we have a pencil here. Writing in the vernacular and being one of the first authors to do so is his most important contribution. He also included themes like individuality and happiness. Dante is best known for his work, The Divine Comedy. And the Divine Comedy is an epic poem. We know about epic poems from ancient Greece, so again, that's a humanistic type of thing Dante's doing. He's hearkening back to the classics like Greek and Roman writing. And he writes an epic poem about a long journey through the afterlife that's divided into 3 parts. The first part is Inferno, which would be what we would consider hell today. Purgatory, which is sort of like a waiting area between heaven and hell. And Paradiso, or paradise, which would be heaven. His work also inspires some other people we've learned about, and I wanted to mention this because you did learn about Botticelli and Renaissance art. And this is Botticelli's vision of the Divine Comedy. It is his own map of hell based on Dante's work. And you can see all sorts of very gruesome things going on here in these images. So Renaissance artists and writers obviously were able to influence one another. Francesco Petrarch is another Italian poet. Petrarch is notable for a few reasons. He's best known for love letters he wrote to an unnamed woman named Laura, and he wrote many, many of these love letters. One of Petrarch's goals was that he, as a humanist, was interested in classical culture, and he wanted to bring together that pagan classical culture of the Greeks and Romans and Christianity and sort of fuse them together. Petrarch believed that humanity could once more reach the heights of those past accomplishments of the Greeks and Romans. Because of this, he's considered one of the founders of the humanist movement in the Renaissance. So that interest in the classical culture that Petrarch had and wanting to bring it forward into his lifetime made him a founder of the humanist movement in the Renaissance. And remember our definition of humanism, the cultural movement in the Renaissance based on the study of classical works. This note here has a pencil, so remember that is something that you may see on your knowledge check. And then the last we're going to look at is Miguel de Cervantes. He's a Spanish author. In 1605, he wrote the first modern novel, and this modern novel is called Don Quixote. So Don Quixote is important because it's a humanist work. It includes characters modeled on classical figures, including a knight who is fighting for the Roman Republic. It celebrates individuality by giving realistic portrayals of humanity. And again, that realism is part of the humanist movement that makes the Renaissance what it is. This story is quite humorous about a bumbling landlord who believes it's his duty to become a knight and right every wrong. And so because of that, the word quixotic is a word you might see on a vocabulary test, kind of a fancy word, but it comes from this novel's title, and it means an idealistic but hopeless endeavor. So this knight's job that he gives himself of trying to right every wrong seems like it would definitely be a hopeless endeavor. One of my favorite parts of this book is when the main character actually gets into a sword fight with a windmill, believing he's fighting a large, giant enemy. So we've talked about Dante and that he wrote in the vernacular, which is his most important contribution. We talked about Petrarch, who is one of the founders of the humanist movement in the Renaissance, and Miguel Cervantes, who wrote Don Quixote, the first modern novel. Make sure that in your notes you understand the differences between medieval and Renaissance literature. You understand and are comfortable with the term vernacular or writing in the spoken language, and important facts about Dante, Petrarch, and Cervantes. Tomorrow we're going to talk about Shakespeare. If you have any questions about these learning goals, make sure to let us know or go back through the video again and make sure you have all of your notes.